In today's video, I'm going to be having a look at the Aussie dollar a little bit deeper, and I don't just mean one currency, I mean across a few different pairs. Hello and welcome to another ACY Securities daily report video. My name is Alistair Schultz and I'm going to be your host for today's trading journey. The first thing I'm looking at today is an Aussie yen weekly chart. Now, we've been seeing a fair bit of action moving on it, and I'm not sure if you can quite see the lines on the screen behind me, but effectively we've had a inverted head and shoulders pattern play out. Now, it has finally broken that barrier and it has been moving up the last few days or weeks even, and moving towards a target that we're still not quite sure if it's going to be able to make the bounce and get through it, or if it is actually going to retrace to some degree. Now, at this stage, we're looking at somewhere in around the 78-cent mark for it to bounce off and head back down. There's a couple of reasons for us thinking that, but let me go through some of the other charts and we'll wrap that up at the end. But right now, we're still a long-term upgoing trend on the Aussie yen, just for a short notice type of thing. Now, looking at this a little bit deeper on the Aussie yen on a 4-hour chart, you do have a trend channel occurring. Now, whilst we do have some sentiment that suggests that traders are looking to take short positions right this very second off what we've got on the Aussie yen, it is still a longer term sentiment. And whilst we're getting towards the top, you can see just the top of this image, that little yellow bar at the very, very top. That's the support, or the resistance line that I was focusing on this chart here on the weekly. It's just above it. So that is where my target is for the moment. I am looking to see if price actually turns around somewhere in the next couple of days and starts aiming for a short side on the bottom of this trend line. Now, moving forward, the dollar index is something to also pay attention to. Now, while we've been focusing on Aussie yen, I'm really focusing more on the Australian dollar itself. So in this instance, looking at the dollar index, it's no wonder why we've actually been getting so much weakness in the dollar, and of course, why the Aussie has been rising against it on the AUD USD. Now, in this instance, what am I seeing really going on the dollar index chart? Well, the first thing to take into account is that if you look where I've got the yellow bar on price right now, this line has been sort of that market making point for a number of years, all the way back beyond the GFC. Every time price gets into this area, we do tend to get a little bit of a turnaround. And that's almost happening right now as well. So what have we got in the way of the US dollar index and the US dollar that might sort of prevent it from going back up? Theoretically, prices should already be starting to come up. We've got yields going up in value on the bonds, but that's only on the long dated ones. The ones that are sort of beyond the 2-year and 3-year range and most likely closer to the 10-year mark for expiries. When we look at the forward ones that are about 4-week expiries, they seem to be keeping the price down a little bit because they just don't have the same performance. They're still down near 0%. So that is causing enough issues for it at this very moment. And I suppose that's probably the closest term image. When we do start getting closer to the expiries of those longer dated treasuries, then we will get a little bit of a difference in variation, and we probably will see the dollar start to rise. But until then, we're still got to keep this idea of more stimulus is coming in, and it's likely going to devalue the US dollar a little bit further. Now, looking at the Aussie dollar on a 4-hour chart, it's no wonder you see the same thing. We have most positions being bearish at the moment for a little bit of a test. We've gotten into an overbought sort of scenario for the time being in the Aussie dollar in the local market, but we've got a little bit of headwind coming up for that. And whilst we do have to have a look and take into account that the RBA is trying to defend around that 80-cent mark, we've also got it being in a little bit of an overbought scenario. We know that we've got more stimulus coming for the US. We know that we've also got a little bit more to come when it talks about vaccine talk as well, which is showing some pretty good results at this stage. The chances are this is likely going to end up coming down for a test at that yellow line before it continues resuming back up on the long side of things. I think there's probably close to a 20 to 25% chance of the Aussie reaching the 80-cent range, at least for the time being. Now, of course, that doesn't mean that by the end of the year we won't be at 85 cents, but it certainly looks to be at this very moment that we are, for the week ahead, this is likely where we're going to be sitting. Now, looking a little bit further on, this is probably the best image I can show you on how far the Aussie dollar has really moved. Now, on the Euro Aussie chart I've got in front of us, it's a monthly chart, and compared to the yen and compared to the US dollar, the euro hasn't had as much impact from coronavirus as what they have. Obviously, the haven side of currency of fiction that you get with the US dollar and the yen does give a little bit of a difference in where their valuations might actually be. Plus, of course, there's a few other varieties of metadata that we can look at that really does give us a bit of information on it. Now, looking at the euro side of things, it's been sort of quite strong. It hasn't had nearly as much of the impact that we've seen. We know it was rising and that we actually ended up getting some jawboning occurring from the ECB, where they're trying to bring it down in the last couple of months. And so when we look at the chart, you can see back in March where I've got the green dot behind me and it says Aussie weakness. That is the point that we had the Australian dollar at its weakest. Now, obviously, it has been weaker than this in the past, but this is most recent history. And now, with all the good news that we've been hearing out of the Aussie dollar, with oils and metals and commodity prices going up, and now the talk about bonds rising, and potentially the end of yield curve control in the not too distant future, we're likely going to keep seeing it go down. However, on a longer term chart, which is what we've got here now on the monthly, I'm looking for a bit of a bounce. I actually think that there's probably a good opportunity right where I've got that yellow bar and the red line. If you wanted to play a reversal play over a long term, this is probably a good place to start looking for it. Naturally, it could all go back pear-shaped and fall through price, but support is quite strong at this level. I think if you are going to base it off the statistical side as opposed to just the fundamental side, this might be an opportunity for you to actually look for a long position. Now, moving on to the Euro Aussie on a 4-hour chart, you can see just how much price has sort of been coming down, lots of Aussie strength. We have got bullish movements on the sentiment side of things with 69% of traders looking for a long position. So obviously going with the trend, you would probably consider taking that long position. It is coming off that support line as well, or that area of support that we pointed out on the previous one. Definitely something to keep your eyes on in the very near term. Now, outside of that, why am I actually watching the Aussie so closely at the moment? Obviously, when we've got so many other pairs that you can trade the Aussie with, an inept amount of data and knowledge about the Aussie, and it's in a good position, I think we're going to start opening up the chances in the near term, probably the midterm, for us to actually have an opportunity to do a bit of a carry trade option on it. Now, at this point in time, I'm going to be keeping an eye on what is going on for the Aussie dollar. The data dump is a little bit light. There's not a huge amount of economic data for us to really update about the economy in Australia this week. We have private capital expenditures for the fourth quarter, and we also have private sector credit for January coming out. They're really the biggest impact for this week. Outside of that, though, we have plenty of things to look for. Naturally, long-term treasuries beyond 3-year marks are the ones we're going to be keeping really close eyes on, particularly when we want to see what's happening with the yield curve controls that's been introduced here in Australia. And there is potential for the hope that it is going to end at some stage, which would again push the Aussie dollar up higher. Now, obviously, short-term T-bills, just like in the US, those 4-week expiry ones, are going to be things to keep your eyes on for the immediate moment action in price. I do think that we are likely going to see a little bit of an uptick, hopefully, in rates, but at this point in time, that yield is not going to be changing too much anyway. And of course, the RBA yield curve controls are definitely the big thing. If the RBA says anything about yield curve control over the next couple of months, then it's going to be an impact point for us all. Now, outside of what we can see on the Aussie watch list, there is plenty to be keeping an eye on for the US, the European, and of course, the yen sort of session as well. Now, keep an eye on all three of those. There is a couple of impacts coming out, more predominantly with the US dollar and the Eurozone, but most of it is also light impact, not heavy. So have a look, check out your economic calendars. In terms of the economic news ahead of today, there isn't a lot. We have European news coming out for the German IFO business sentiment and climate feelings. We've also got the German bubble report, which not a massive impact on that one. US CB index coming out as well, so again, another sentiment thing. And tomorrow, please don't forget, it is a bank holiday for Japan. Now, that's really all I have for today's video, but please feel free to get in contact with me if you have any questions. Any of the above social media things that are being shown behind me right now, you can get in contact with me quite easily. And don't forget to like and subscribe this video so you can get more great content from me and ACY Securities in the future. Have a great trading day ahead.